Heyo, tabletop sports fans. This is Bob from Bob's Tabletop Sports coming to you with more on Fütti. For those of you who haven't seen this game yet, we have another video out that kind of explains the basics of this game. This video is going to go into a deep dive about topics like setting up a league, setting up a match, and then the different types of checks that are in the game. We'll be doing another video after this one on going into detail on the doubles chart, and then another video after that which will go into the score sheet and how to score a game, and then we'll probably do another video after that which will go into actual gameplay and showing you some examples of actual gameplay, like an actual game. So with that, let's talk about setting up a league. Actually, before we do that, one other thing I have to do, sorry. I want to talk to you about the new version of the game, Beta 0.2. If you go out to this site, and I'll have the link here in the doobly-doo, just like we did the last time. But if you go out there, there is an updated version of the rules. There were some small tweaks to the rules, which I've been playing with for probably the last 6 months or so in my games, and accidentally kind of leaked some of them in the first video. So the rules that were presented in the first video match up with the newer rules, but don't match up with the rules that were given to you in at that time. So the updated rules will have that. I also updated a new version of this. This is the official game mat. Darken these numbers and letters and stuff here a bit just to make it easier to read. I realized after videoing that first one that this is almost impossible for someone to read on video, and it's kind of difficult actually in person. So you know what, I darken that up just a little bit, so that's going to be in there as well. And then also updated the doubles charts with a few things to correspond to the newer rules as well. So you'll see a file out there. There's actually a releases section. You can get it right from there. It'll be a zip file called Fütti-beta-0.2, and that will contain a full package of all the newest stuff. If you printed out all the stuff already, I apologize. You can print out a new version of this. The only thing you really need to print out is the doubles chart and the game board itself. And then one other thing that's in there too, I got a comment on the last video that they couldn't find the newer players, the ones with the with the nice little thing here for the teams, and the older players were in there. Yeah, I should have specified that that's not in that zip package. It is in this newer zip package. So the beta 0.2 will have these players in them instead of the older players. But if you wanted just to get the the newer players, there's a file in the directory on the GitHub site, which just says new players in there, and you can get them from there. Okay. All right. With that, let's go to what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about setting up a league first of all. Now, when you get this game, and like we were just talking about, you're going to get some players. And so this is an example of what these print out to be. This is like 2 of the sheets, and I cut out the other 2 sheets. So there's 4 sheets there. Actually, no, 3 sheets. So there's 3 sheets. I cut out 1 of the sheets. So this is 2 of the 3 sheets. And this is basically enough to do 12 teams, okay? So for each team that you're going to have here, you're going to have essentially up to 6 regular players and then 2 goaltenders. Every team should have that. Now, this isn't just each team, although you could do it that way. You could just say, you know what, each team is 1 line, and we'll go that way, okay? That's one way you could do this. Another way is you could set up a draft and, draft players and set up, you could say, well, we've got enough for 12 teams, but let's do 8 teams and they can be a little bit stronger. So then we'll do a draft for 8 teams, and Some of the smaller players, like, for example, this Herman here, who's a 1-1, or Jokinen or whatever, wouldn't really be in the league. Okay. The other thing you could do is just randomize it. Just, shuffle up all the players and then deal them out to each team. That's another way to go too. And so that works just as well. There's also, if you want to create your own league and you want to create your own players and go that route, there is a league creation guide on the GitHub site. So it's a file that's in the GitHub directory there, in the main directory. All you have to do is look for it. You'll see a league creation guide, and that will go over all you need to know about how to create your own players. You'll have to figure out how to card them yourself, like using something like Affinity or make an Excel template. I'm actually looking for someone to help me create an Excel template for these cards. I use Affinity Designer myself, but you can use any tool you like to make cards, and they're pretty simple because they really only have, a few values on it. Like for an offensive player, or just a regular player, they have an offense and a defense value. They may have a star, they have a sportsmanship value, and a name. That's it. That's all you really need, okay? The goaltenders are going to be even more simpler because really the only thing that they have on here, and I keep shaking the camera, I apologize because I'm trying to reach for something here, is a goaltending value and a sportsmanship value. That's it, okay? So very simple, very easy to do. And it's not really going to stretch your design skills to make cards for this if you want to make your own league and have fun with it. The other cool thing about this guide is it's going to give you rules so that you can keep your league going after one season. So you played one season, that's great. Then you get to go through and make changes to the league. You get to draft new players into the league. You get to do some free agency. You get to do retirements of players, and you'll have your teams for the next year. And right now I'm working on an extra section to that guide to handle relegation of teams and bringing new teams into the league, which I've done with my own personal league. So brought in some new teams for that as well. And so really cool guide there. All right. The next thing let's talk about is once you set up a team, so each team is going to have 6 offensive players, or I call them offensive players, but they're really just general players, so 6 players, and you're going to have 2 goaltenders, so a total of 8 people on each team. So I've created 2 teams here, and you can see them right here, okay? So we have this team here, and then we have this team here. So let's go and actually set this up for a game. So we're going to take our 6 players, our 6 normal players. We're going to take our 2 goaltenders. We're going to figure out who's playing in the game, what positions they're playing in, and then we're going to determine control after we're done with that. So let's see who we have. We have, and we're going to get these on camera here. So Ghosh, who is a 1-4. Good sportsmanship, by the way. Cheng. These values can range from 1 to 5. So Cheng, 2-2. We have Vega, who's a 4-1, a 41 goaltender. So that's one of our possible goaltending options. We have Hall, who's a 35, who's a goaltender. We have Vestergaard, who is a 4-4 offense-defense, 2 sportsmanship only, but 2 control stars. That is crazy. That's a really good player there. Yao, a 4-2 with a star and a 3 sportsmanship, and Lee, a 3-1 with 2 sportsmanship, and then Mong with a 3-4. So let's talk about positioning first. I'm going to move these guys over a bit so we can kind of talk about positioning, okay? I'll move these guys off right now. So you want your players with the best offensive values to play in these 2 positions here, and your 2 players with the best defensive values to play in these 2 spots here. You have a 4 in 6 chance of getting one of these 2 spots on an offensive role, and these 2 only a 2 in 6 chance for an offensive role, where we choose players. So when we choose players role at the beginning of a minute, it's going to essentially give us a 1, 2, 3, or 4, or a 5 or 6, right? more likely going to get somebody in the front row, right? So we want good players up there for offense, good players for defense in the defense. So we can see here that we have Mong. He would be really good at defense, right? He's a 3-4, better at defense, so probably ends up there. We also have Ghosh here, who has a really good defense, but not really good offense. And that's probably a player that we can play on defense. Remember, we want to play our guys with stars too, right? So someone like Chang or Lee, we might want to consider not playing them because we want to have control during the game. Vestergaard here, a 4-4, can play both offense or defense. That's really kind of a good versatile player. They can play either side. And then Yao with a 4-2 and 3 sportsmanship as well there. So that's probably pretty good. And then we can just take these other players, put them off to the side. And these are our backup players. Now we have 2 goaltenders left. We have Vega and Hall. We're going to choose Vega for this game, but that's not going to be a guarantee that Vega is going to play in this game. So before every game, we're going to roll for each team to see whether or not their chosen goaltender is going to start for the game. In this example here, Vega, we just have to roll a die. If we get a 6, Vega does not start for the game. Otherwise, Vega starts. So in this example here, we rolled a 4, as you can see here. So Vega will start this game, and Hall will be our backup. So let's set up the other team. This team has a little bit more challenges. And you're going to see this pretty quickly here as we go through this. We got a 3-1, a 1-2, a 4-3 with a star, a 2-1 with a star, and then we got a 3-3 and a 1-1. And we have 2 goaltenders. We'll go through the goaltenders here in a minute. But let's talk about this one because this one's interesting. You have to make a decision here because, again, like I said, you want to play as many stars as possible. When you're playing a team, or the team, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, plus the home team star, that's 5 stars, right? You're going to have to match as many of those stars as possible. Right now, they have 3 stars, so at this point, this matchup becomes that, right? But if we take one of these players, let's say we don't play Ortega because he's a 2-1, and put somebody else in his place, this moves over to here, and that becomes a real big problem for this team, okay? So, in this case, we want to play all of our stars, and it's not going to be easy to do that. So one thing we know is Richter can be really pivotal, and we're lacking defense, so Richter is probably a great choice for defense, okay? But if we look at all of our rest of our players, outside of Beck, we have 1 or 2 defense. And if we choose to play Mason or Martin, that becomes a problem with us being able to field Ortega. And we do want to field Ortega. So Ortega, if we put Ortega to have defense, we only have a 1 defense there. That is some really bad news. But it does allow us to play Beck up front. But what might be the better play is to play Ortega up front and then play Beck in the back because they still have the 3 defense, and that's still pretty good. And on the one roll that they do get that player at offense, that's a little bit of surprise offensive boost. And then Michael here would play on the front with the 3-1, and then you put these other 2 in the back. I'm going to put these down here. They might be a little bit off camera. I apologize. And then we do have 2 options for goaltender again, so Summer and Morel, and we'll just roll here. Oh, and so they rolled a 6, so Morel has to play this game. Well, Summer cannot play this game, so Summer is going to be out. Now, just looking at this, we'll set up our control. So remember, we compare stars for control, and right here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 stars over here, and we have 3 stars over here. Difference of 2. And you can see here, 0, 1 to 2, or 3 plus. This is still 1 to 2. If we wouldn't have played Ortega, it would have been 3 plus, and we would have been all the way over here. So our control ranges for the game are going to be 6 to 12 on this side on the D12, and 1 to 5 on this side for the D12. It would have been a lot worse if we moved over here, and then all of a sudden it's 1 to 4, and then 5 to 12, right? You can see where that would get out of hand very quickly. Okay, so we've talked about setting up our match, and now we'll talk about checks. Now, checks are a pivotal part of this game where we are going to set up basically, or we're basically testing a player attribute. So for example, here, Vestergaard here has a 4 offense, 4 defense, and a 2 sportsmanship. All of those are things that we can test. We can test offense, we can test defense, we can test sportsmanship. Okay. The general rule is that we would roll a die. So in Vestergaard's chance, let's say we're going to test their offense, right? We roll a die, and you can see here we rolled a 5. Now the offense value is a 4. And our goal on any check that we make is that we're trying to get the target number or the value to be, the die roll to be equal to or less than that target value. So in this case, for offense, they needed a 4 or less, and we got a 5, which means that that check failed. If we would have gotten a 1 to 4, that check would have succeeded. One basic rule to remember is that checks on a roll of 1, the check always succeeds, and on a 6, the check always fails. This is also in the beta 0.2 rulebook, and it was not in the 0.1 rulebook. Okay? So on a roll of 1, it always succeeds, a 6, it always fails. We have our offense and defensive checks. These are the basic checks in the game which we would do after a player selection. So we would initially do our player selection. So in this example, we get Vestergaard and Ortega, which is a really bad person to play defense on this roll, but that's the way it came up. Then we would make our offense and defense checks. And I usually roll the 12-sided as well, so we get control if needed. And in this case, it was needed because both players failed their checks. Offensive check here, they rolled a 5. It's a 4, failed the check. On this player, this check here, it was a 1. We rolled a 2. That person also failed their check. So in this case, 8 determines our control for the next minute, which means they keep the ball for the next minute, and that minute is completed. Sportsmanship checks. So sometimes you may have to make a sportsmanship check to avoid a penalty. Like possibly getting a yellow card or possibly getting a red card. Okay, so on these checks, you're going to be rolling against your sportsmanship, and again, it's just going to be less than or equal. So let's take Vestergaard here, and they rolled a 6. So in this case, they would get a penalty. Okay, the way that the penalties work is there's yellow cards and red cards. If you are testing for a red card and you fail the check, you get a red card and you're out of the game for good. Okay, and then the other team gets a penalty shot. If you get a yellow card, so if you're rolling for a yellow card, if you're rolling for a red card and you made your check, however, you just get a yellow card. If you're making a yellow card check and you fail, you get a yellow card, which means you're taken out of the game temporarily, and you'll be able to come back at the next hard timeout, which remember, hard timeout is whenever there's a goal, whenever there is a penalty or another penalty and somebody else gets a yellow card, there's an injury, or you reach the halftime. Okay, at that point, that player can come back into the game, and the player that was swapped out for them can come back out of the game. Okay, so whenever you pull a player out of the game, you can then use someone else to come back in for them. So there'll never be a situation where you're short unless you have 3 players that get red cards or have major injuries and are out of the game. Then the rules do specify how to deal with that. Okay, the next kind of check is injury checks. So you notice that none of these players have injury ratings, right? So injury checks are based on whatever stat that they used for that roll. So for example, here on offense, if Vestergaard was making an injury check, he would use his offensive value. So the offensive value here is a 4. So we'd have to roll a 4 or less to avoid injury. In this case, Vestergaard has some really bad luck today. Vestergaard would be injured. He would be out of the game for a little bit. In the example of our defensive player, because they're playing defense, their rating is a 1, so they have to get a 1 or less, and they basically have to get a 1. And in this case, Ortega is injured as well. And these work a lot like the same way as the penalty checks work, insofar that if you're testing for a major injury and you fail, you are out of the game for the rest of the game. If you are testing for that major injury and you succeed, you get a minor injury instead and you come out of the game temporarily until the next hard timeout. If you are testing for a minor injury and you succeed, or if you failed on that roll, then you just have a regular minor injury. You're out until the next hard timeout. Otherwise, if you made the check, you have no injury, and it's just considered a scrape or whatever, but your team does get possession for the next minute. And that reminds me to back up on the sportsmanship checks. If you make a yellow card check and you succeed the check, it just means that you had a minor foul and the possession turns over to the other team for the next minute. Okay. Now, after that, we have goaltender checks. And goaltender checks are kind of like a base 6 number. So Vega has a 41. Goaltenders could never have, say, like a 47 or 48 or 49 because these are base 6 numbers based on a 6-sided roll. The 4 represents the 10s. The 1 there represents the 1s, and they correspond to the black die representing the 10s and the white die representing the 1s. And so when we make a roll, we just see if we are less than or equal to, and as you can see here, a 16, Vega would have made that check, and he would have made a save. However, if he would have failed the check, then it would have been a goal. There is one concept, this has to do with breakaways and with penalty shots, and that is something called the -10 concept. So on those rolls, the goaltender would have a -10 to their check. What that means is that we don't subtract 10 from that number in a base 10 way. We just subtract a 1 from the leading number. So in this example for Vega, that 41 would become a 31. And then we just make our check based on a 31. And in this example, again, Vega did save. So Vega is pretty solid today. Okay. Penalty shots. So we talked about red flag or red cards, and then the opposing team getting a penalty shot. Then we would choose a player to make that penalty shot. So example, maybe we choose Miguel to make a penalty shot against this team. And in that case, what they would do is they would first roll 1 die. This is technically an offense check, but the offense value doesn't matter. All we care about is if they get a 6 or not. A 6 will fail, means they hit the crossbar, they went wide or whatever. Otherwise, they hit a goal shot, and the goaltender needs to make a save. So in this example, they rolled a 2, and they would get a shot on goal. Then the goaltender would just make a save at -10. And as you can see here, the goaltender Vega made that check because it was a 31 or less. They got a 24, so they succeeded in their check. The team making the penalty shot will then get the ball for the next minute, whether they made the shot or not. Whether or not they got the penalty shot goal or they didn't, they still get the ball for the next minute. Defender breakaway chart, or defender breakaway check. So defender breakaways. So if you remember, let's set up this situation here. In this example, excuse my coughing here. So for example here, Vestergaard has a 4 and defense 3 for Richter. And say in this example, then on our check, we rolled a 5 again for offense for Vestergaard because he's just not doing very well today. And we rolled a 2 for the white die for Richter, and that means that Richter succeeded on his defensive roll, which means that he makes a steal. So that we would change these, and we do our next minute. Now in our next minute, we roll our dice. And if this black die corresponds to Richter, who just stole, we would get a breakaway attempt. We rolled a 3 here. Let's say it was a 6 instead. So that means Richter got selected again after the steal. That means they get a breakaway shot, okay? So breakaways, the way that they work is we add 2 to the offense. That's a rule changed from beta 1. Beta 1 had it as only adding 1. Now we add 2. So this becomes a 5. They only fail in a 6. Now, if this is Vestergaard, say we added a 4, 4 plus 2 is a 6, they still fail on a 6. So it's technically just a 5. So in this case here, Richter would make the shot. And again, Vega minus 10. And Vega... unfortunately did not make the save, and it's a goal. Okay, so it's always that way. Now, it can also happen on the doubles chart where you get a breakaway. In that case, it's just an automatic steal and then a breakaway attempt right after that. You don't have to roll to get their position again. It's just a more certain breakaway. So that is all we have for this video. These are the things that we wanted to talk about. We talked about the new rules coming out, the new version, the beta 0.2. We have a new set of rules, a new chart if you'd like to get, which has a bit better contrast on it, a new doubles chart, which kind of updates some of the rules in there that should have been updated previously. And then also there are these specific cards in the bundle. So if you get the zip file, you get all of that. We talked about setting up a league. Each team has 6 normal players and then 2 goaltenders. And we talked about setting up a match. So we gave some advice on how to position players, who you choose for your backups, and then setting up your goaltender and knowing that a goaltender does not play on a roll of a 6 for a game. Okay? And then we talked about setting control and how we count the stars, including the home team star, in order to set up our control for our red die value here to determine who gets control. Then we also talked about checks and the basics of checks, and we're comparing a value on a card. So for example, offense 4 with a die roll, and hoping that the die roll will be equal to or less, which means that they succeeded that check. Otherwise, they failed that check. Okay. We have the rule of 1 or 6, sorry. 1 being always an automatic success, 6 always a failure. We talked about offensive and defensive checks on a normal roll and how those work. We talked about sportsmanship checks and some of the rules around red cards and yellow cards. We talked about injury checks, where we get the value from the offense value if they're on offense, defense value if they're on defense. And then for goaltenders, we always use a 3. So they don't have an actual value, so they use a 3. Then we talked about goaltender checks themselves. So on a goaltender check, we would roll on with the black die being a 10s, the white die being the 1s against the goaltender. And then we talked about the concept of a minus 10, where we just subtract 1 from the first number of their rating. Then we talked about penalty shots and the rules for penalty shots and how a 6 always fails, but every other number succeeds, and then the shot is at a minus 10. And then we talked about defender breakaways and some of the specific rules around that, and how player selection works in regards to that. So that's all we have for today. The next episode, we'll be talking about the doubles chart. We hope that anybody that watched this video liked this content, that they like the video. If you really like this content on this channel, we hope that you also become a subscriber and just hit the subscribe button. And we hope to see you here for more videos on this series. Like I said, the next video we're going to be doing doubles charts. The video after that, we will be talking more in specific about how to score the game on the score sheet. And then the video after that will also do a sample game, so you can see a whole game being played out. And reminder again, just to go out, check out the new rules. The link is in the doobly-doo, and we'll talk about the beta 0.2. You can get that and download that, right? So thank you all for watching. Hope to see you in the next video.